Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakaha, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is your brother Ayash Kabar from the GMS Virginia camp, coming at you with another lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai that I pray that you find edifying. And this is a very short article out of ShitHitTheFanPlan.com. And the title of it reads, almost half of Americans expect a civil war in less than a decade. And this is dated June 18th, 2025, a few days ago. And the fact that these people actually think that they have a decade or less before a civil war breaks out lets me know through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai that they have no spiritual discernment whatsoever. Because looking at what's going on in the world, and using the scriptures, that's able to give you an idea of what time you're in. Starting with our apostles, elders, and bishops on down, there's a very tight understanding of what time we're in, because the brothers are listening and watching the news and they're lining it up with scriptures, so that gives you a very strong idea what time you're in. Well, these people have no idea what time they're in, The fact that they can sit back and say that they have less than a decade lets me know through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai that they have no spiritual discernment whatsoever. And so when things start popping off, they're not going to understand where it's coming from. They're not going to understand why it's happening. But a lot of these Americans are preparing now for these exact things to take place, i.e. a civil war. So I'm going to get into this article, and I pray that you find this edifying. And it reads, 40% of Americans expect a civil war to break out within the next decade in a poll which surveyed 3,375 adults. Almost half were convinced that a civil war was somewhat or very likely within the next decade. The poll, conducted by YouGov and released on Tuesday, underscores widespread anxiety over the nation's deepening political divisions. The outcome of this poll also comes on the heels of a wave of unrest in the country, including violent protests against the federal deportations and nationwide demonstrations aimed at President Donald Trump. So the people are restless. The people have anxiety over what's going on. A lot of these people that have actually voted for, this president feel as if they've been cheated. And they have, because this devil said out of his own mouth that he was a snake. He read a poem that said he was a snake. So why would you not believe what he was saying? There was no reason for him to bring that poem out other than to let you know that he was a snake. Of all the poems that he could have recited during his conventions or what the fuck ever, he chose that one to let you know he was a snake. And a lot of these Americans bit into it, hook, line, and sinker, as well as a lot of you Northern Kingdom Jakes who voted for this man, who actually thought that he was your savior. And now your savior is deporting your ass without your children, without your wives, without your husbands, without your family. And now a lot of you Northern Kingdom Jakes are starting to look towards the Southern Kingdom for help. But you've been shitty towards your brother this entire time. And your brother has been shitty towards you this entire time. So, you Northern Kingdoms are just you Northern Kingdom Jakes are just as wicked as the Southern Kingdom Jakes. and you going through your shit now. Because Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai is, he's passing judgment on you, Jakes. He's passing judgment on you, Jakes. These other nations aren't your savior. And you don't even realize that your oppressor is kicking your ass out after you so-called voted for him in office. So you chose your allegiance. And Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai is putting your ass in check behind it. Reading on with the article, recently, Trump has taken to totalitarian control using the National Guards and Marines to clamp down on the protests in Los Angeles over the actions of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Earlier this month, riots erupted across California in response to the federal immigration enforcement actions. Trump deployed the National Guard and Marines after a public clash with California Governor Gavin Newsom over handling the crisis. And they both are working together on this. You have your good cop, bad cop. You have your bad cop, bad or cop. They're working together on this. And don't be fooled by this bullshit. Reading on with the article, Trump orders additional 2,000 National Guardsmen to LA as riots continue, and 7,000 Marines deployed to California. So initially, it was a peaceful protest, but the escalation of having law enforcement there and just took shit out of control, and now, of course, Babylon the Great, this order of chaos is being put in place. You see what I'm saying? Because they need this. They want you to riot. They want you to protest. They want you to loot. They want you to go crazy. They want you to hurt people. This devil done went the fuck ahead and stuck articles in a fucking newspaper asking for specific men who are willing to do specific things. Reading on with the article, women are more likely than men to consider civil conflict plausible, with 45% indicating it was likely. Views also vary by political affiliation. 48% of Democrats and 39% of independents and 32% of Republicans said a civil war was at least somewhat probable, while the respondents were more or less split on the likelihood of a civil war. Just over 20% was unsure or declined to answer. The data also suggests racial disparities. Among white respondents, 10% said a civil war was very likely, compared to 18% of black respondents. Hispanics were the least likely to completely dismiss the idea, with only 11% saying a conflict was not likely at all, while 15% called it very likely. On Saturday, an estimated 5 million people participated in No Kings marches across all 50 states. Organizers described the protests as a stand against authoritarianism, billionaires' first politics, and the militarization of our democracy. What are your thoughts? Will a civil war break out? Could this be a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or will people calm down and figure out the real enemy isn't each other, but its throne? So these people have no idea of what's coming down the pipe. Because it's all through the will of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahweh Shai. The book of Isaiah, chapter 19 and verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. So it is the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, to bring this kingdom down. And it's the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushai to set the kingdom, or to set the Egyptian against the Egyptian, because Yahweh Shai said, let me get it. I don't have that precept. Lined up. Essentially, it's saying the same thing that I just read, but it's put another way. Let me see. Salakia. I believe it's in the book of Matthew. Let me see. Salakia. Let me see. Yeah, the book of Matthew, chapter 12 and verse 26. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then shall his kingdom stand? And it's the same thing against Egyptian. How is his kingdom going to stand? It's not going to stand, but have it in. And that's exactly what you're witnessing now through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, about how this man is divided. Contrary to what these articles may say, the words of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai trumps all that bullshit. The book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 16 and verse 37, behold, the plagues draw nigh and are not slack. And one of those plagues, is war. This civil war here in Babylon the Great. Because there's going to be great death and great famine. The scriptures tell you that. Jumping back to the book of Isaiah, chapter 19 and verse 3. And the spirit of Egypt shall fall in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to their idols and and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. So when this place falls, these Egyptians are gonna go to, or try to go to, what they know the best, and that's their witchcraft. That's their summoning of wicked spirits and demons, and their prognosticators aren't going to have an answer for them. And all of these things are happening right before your eyes, even to this day, because contrary to what these fucking people believe, a civil war is imminent. And when I mean imminent, I mean imminent. Here it is. You got these Edomites going up into the mountains, training and practicing, their 8-year-old daughter named Becky how to shoot a fucking rifle. Whereas you Jakes are going to fucking festivals and having dance-offs on TikTok. So you're not ready for what's coming. The book of 2nd Esdras, jumping back to 16 and verse 38. And when a woman with child in the 9th month bringeth forth her son, with 2 or 3 hours of her birth, great pains can pass her womb. And these great pains are passing through Babylon, but it's only going to get worse and worse. Those birth pains are gonna cause a lot of anguish, because we are at the beginnings of sorrows, wars, and rumors of wars. Here it is. We're already at the beginning of World War III. It's been going on for a while, but now missiles are being sent more and more. The escalation is constantly growing, in the world. Nations are choosing their sides, or nations have chosen their sides. And for the most part, everything is lined up. So these people who actually think that a civil war here in Babylon the Great will happen in 10 years are off. They're off. Because through the spirit, things can happen at any moment now. And that's really going to fuck them up, because here it is, these people actually think they got time to prepare. Nah, they ain't got time to prepare for shit. Reading on with the book of 2 Esdras, chapter 16 and verse 38. Which pains when the child cometh forth, they slack not a moment. And so those pains, when it comes, when your child is being born, those pains don't slack. You know, those pains intensify. And when they intensify, great, you know, the woman starts screaming, and, you know, the pain to her almost at, you know, in some cases become unbearable. You know? Because this is where we're at. The book of Isaiah, chapter 19 and verse 4. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord. And that cruel Lord is that last trump. You know, and a fierce king shall rule over them. You know, and here it is, you know, this devil is passing laws, decrees that are going forth over here in Babylon the Great, you know, and they're not to the benefit of Yasharallah, you know, and so that cruel Lord is going to do some very cruel things, because here it is, this man wants to bring back capital death, shooting squads, and you know, the guillotine. He wants these things back. He told you he wants them back. And a lot of you Jakes, you seem to think that, you know, what's happening isn't happening. You know? Let me see. I'm gonna finish out in the book of 2 Esdras, chapter 16 and 39, and read down a few. Even so shall not the plagues be slack to come upon the earth, and the world shall mourn, and sorrow shall come upon it on every side. That's what's coming. And this is the point. The book of 2 Esdras, chapter 16 and verse 40. O my people, hear my word. Make ye ready to the battle. And in those evils be even as pilgrims upon the earth. You know, Jake don't even think that they're in the battle. They don't think that it's a continual war going on day to day. From the moment you close your eyes until the minute you wake up, you're at war. It never stopped. It never ceased. You know, because this devil is always thinking of ways, you know, to destroy you. And ultimately, that's what it's about. You know, this devil wants to destroy Yasharallah. You know, but you know, you Jakes ain't ready. And so when this civil war takes place, a lot of you ain't going to know what to do. You know, you're not going to understand, you know, to prepare for the battle. You're just going to be in it. And you're not going to understand, you know, that you have to be as a pilgrim, you know, looking for that spiritual place, moving all the time, you know. So, yeah, you know, we're definitely in those times where Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is about to cause Babylon the Great to have all-out calamities. All hell's about to break loose. And this article off of this website is just an indication of where the people's mindset is. Because when shit hits the fan, it ain't going to stop until Yahweh Hashem Yahushua destroys this place, you know? And so with that, you know, I'm enough on that. And so with that, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rakaha, Kodash, double honor to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. Shalom.